Happy Tuesday, everyone. Today we're going to be focusing on misplaced and dangling modifiers. And at the end of the class, you are going to have a Jamboard assignment where you are correcting these modifiers. So this is a review lesson as we did this in the fall. So some of these things may come back to you and some of these things may be new. So let's get started. So in our modifiers lesson, we're always going to be asking ourselves, should I put my modifier at the beginning of the sentence, or would it be better in the middle or at the end? These will be the questions that we're constantly having to ask ourselves. But first, tell me what you know. What is a modifier? Think about the root word modify. What can you remember back to the fall? Get a definition in your head? Well, a modifier, and when we're thinking about misplaced modifiers, is a word, phrase, or clause that seems to modify or change the wrong word or word group in a sentence, and this is called a misplaced modifier. So modifiers are things that change a sentence, and sometimes we have misplaced and dangling modifiers, which are bad. So we're going to try and correct these mistakes that we often make in writing. So when you're working on misplaced modifiers, a misplaced and or inappropriately used modifier item on an objective test might look like this, where they give you 3 examples like A, broken and dusty, Clarence found an old computer in the garage. B, broken and dusty, the garage had an old computer that was found by Clarence. And C, in the garage, Clarence found an old computer that was broken and dusty. All 3 sentences are essentially saying the same thing, but 2 of them are misplaced modifiers because they're confusing. So the correct answer would be C, because the computer, not Clarence and not the garage, is the thing that is broken and dusty. If we look at A, broken and dusty Clarence, that's confusing. Same with B, broken and dusty the garage. That's not what we're trying to say is broken and dusty, but in this 3rd example, in the garage, Clarence found an old computer that was broken and dusty. It's very clear that we're talking about the computer, not Clarence and the garage. So when we're working with present participle phrases, when we place a present participle phrase right before or after the word it describes, we always need to remember that present participles are verbs plus ing. So if we look at the word dripping, that would be a present participle. Drip is a verb plus ing. So dripping with hot fudge and whipped cream, the children ate banana splits. Well, this sentence is a misplaced modifier because it sounds as if the children are dripping with hot fudge, not the banana splits. So we need to make a correction to this. By changing the sentence to the children ate banana splits dripping with hot fudge and whipped cream, now the banana splits are the ones that are dripping with hot fudge, not the children. So it's important that we're changing that when we have a present participle phrase. Now, I want you to figure out which one is written correctly, which sentence is actually saying what it's trying to say. A, sitting on the top shelf of the refrigerator, Desmond saw Mom's pristine birthday cake. Next one, Desmond, sitting on the top shelf of the refrigerator, saw Mom's pristine birthday cake. And then finally, sitting on the top shelf of the refrigerator, Mom's pristine birthday cake caught Desmond's attention. Take a moment and try and figure out which one is properly stating the correct thing without a misplaced modifier. If you answered C, you are correct. Sitting on the top shelf of the refrigerator, Mom's pristine birthday cake caught Desmond's attention. It's very clear that we're talking about the birthday cake on the top shelf of the refrigerator, not Desmond sitting on the top shelf of the refrigerator, and not the mom sitting on the refrigerator. This is the birthday cake. Now, when we have a past participle phrase right before or right after the word it describes, sometimes we can come into another misplaced modifier. Now, a past participle is a verb plus ed, but sometimes we have irregular forms of this and it doesn't follow that pattern precisely. So in the living room, Paul kicked the television, angered by the football score. This sentence is a misplaced modifier because it sounds as if the television is angered by the football score, which we know televisions can't get angry. But we want to say that Paul is angry. So we're going to change it to angered by the football score. Paul kicked the television in the living room. This is a correct way of saying the sentence because it sounds as if Paul is angered by the football score, which can happen, where a TV cannot be angered. So using the same type of sentence, which one is written correctly? A, huddled by the door, the rain made the wet kitten cry to come in. Huddled by the door, the wet kitten cried to come in from the rain. Or crying to come in, the door is where the wet kitten huddled during the rain. Which one is correctly stating the sentence without using a misplaced modifier? If you answered B, you are correct. Huddled by the door, the wet kitten cried to come in from the rain. We know that this is correct because it sounds as if the wet kitten is the one huddled by the door, not anything else, which is correct. Now, when we have an adjective clause right after the word it describes, sometimes we can get a misplaced modifier as well. An adjective clause begins with a word such as that, which, or who. So the landscaper wrestled the old lawnmower through the long grass that coughed and choked. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never heard of grass coughing or choking, so something's wrong with this sentence. So we need to change it so the adjective clause is no longer making a misplaced modifier. If we change the sentence to the landscaper wrestled the old lawnmower that coughed and choked through the long grass, this makes sense. An old lawnmower can cough and choke where the grass cannot do that. So this no longer has a misplaced modifier. With that same thing in mind, I want you to select the sentence that is written correctly and does not have a misplaced modifier. Is it A, Rosalind struggled up the 3 flights of stairs in her new jeans, which were too tight for comfort? Or too tight for comfort, Rosalind struggled up the 3 flights of stairs in her new jeans? Or is it in her new jeans, Rosalind struggled up 3 flights of stairs, which were too tight for the comfort? Well, the important thing that we need to ask ourselves when we're answering this is what was too tight for comfort? Is it the jeans, like the first sentence is describing? Is it Rosalind in the second sentence? Or is it the stairs in this third sentence? Which one is too tight for comfort? Well, it would make most sense that A, the jeans were too tight for comfort, which means A is the correct answer. Now, we also, when we place modifiers correctly, we need to avoid passive voice verbs, which a passive voice is a form of be plus past participles plus by, which that sounds confusing. That sounds a lot like math, right? Well, let's look at this sentence and maybe it'll give you a better picture of what we're talking about. Typing furiously, the essay was finished by Beatrice just before the 3 p.m. deadline. So, in this sentence, it sounds like the essays typed themselves, but that's not logical. We know that the essay can't type itself, but it's Beatrice. So, how do we need to change this so there's no longer a passive voice? Well, typing furiously, Beatrice finished the essay by the 3 p.m. deadline. This is logical because Beatrice is the one typing the essay, not the essay itself. Now, avoid using the passive voice and correct or choose which sentence is written correctly. Is it A, seated by the window, Barbara munched popcorn on the long bus ride home? Is it B, seated by the window, popcorn was munched by Barbara on the long bus ride home? Or Barbara munched popcorn seated by the window on the long bus ride home? Well, the correct answer is A, seated by the window, Barbara munched popcorn on the long bus ride home, because it's very clear that Barbara is the one seated by the window, not the popcorn. Now, we have misplaced modifiers and then we have dangling modifiers. Now, a dangling modifier is a modifier that doesn't clearly and sensibly modify or change another word or word group. So it's a confusing type of sentence. So a modifier should clearly and sensibly describe another word or word group. So if we're looking at this sentence, rowing on the lake, which is our modifier, strange bugs were seen. So the question we're asking is who or what is rowing the lake? Is it bugs? Well, we have to ask ourselves, what is confusing in this sentence? It's who's rowing the lake. So dangling modifiers can happen often, and we have to make changes in order to make sure that our sentences are making the most sense. So dangling modifiers often occur at the beginning of a sentence. When a sentence begins with a participle phrase, use these steps to see if the phrase is dangling. So step 1, look at the word or word group right after the comma. So a participle phrase like making the bed, my cat crawled under the covers. We need to ask ourselves, does it make sense for the phrase to modify the word after the comma? Was the cat making the bed? No, it doesn't make sense for the participle phrase to modify cat. So if the modifying phrase doesn't sensibly modify the word or word group after the comma, you probably have a dangling modifier, and we can change that. So let's try out this sentence. Listening to music is our dangling modifier. The doorbell could not be heard. Now, is the doorbell listening to music? Does it make sense that the doorbell was listening to music? No. So we know that there's a dangling modifier in this sentence. Hurrying, the ski lift stopped and the boys got on. Well, was the ski lift hurrying? How could we possibly fix this sentence? Dressed in warm clothing, the cold was no problem. Was the cold dressed in warm clothing? And how could we fix this? Well, let's look at this sentence. Let's look at actually the last couple sentences. So, listening to music, the doorbell could not be heard. We need to identify who was listening to music. So I could say, when I was listening to music, the doorbell could not be heard. That tells me who's listening to music, and it clarifies that it's not the doorbell. The next sentence, hurrying, the ski lift stopped and the boys got on. We could say, the boys hurried to get on the ski lift after it stopped. The next one, dressed in warm clothing, the cold was no problem. We could say, the girls were dressed in warm clothing, so the cold was no longer a problem. It identifies who we are talking about. Now, dangling modifiers can also occur in other places in a sentence as well. So it doesn't just have to be at the beginning of the sentence. So if we look at this sentence, my head immediately hit the pillow, exhausted. Exhausted is our dangling modifier. It's unclear what it's talking about. Was the pillow exhausted? No, but that's how it is written. So we would want to change this to, I was exhausted as my head immediately hit the pillow. It makes it clear that I was exhausted, not the pillow. Now the next one, the smells approaching the bakery were inviting. Did the smells approach the bakery? Well, that's how it's written, but that doesn't make sense. So we could say, as I approached the bakery, the smells were inviting. That clarifies I'm approaching the bakery and the smells were inviting. So I want you to take a moment and correct or choose the dangling modifier in each of these sentences. What is unclear? Unexplored for years, scientists are now learning more about the ocean. What is confusing in this sentence? What is the dangling modifier? Well, the dangling modifier is unexplored for years. What was unexplored for years? Number 2, walking, the morning was pleasant. I don't know about you guys, but who was walking? Walking is the confusing part. It's the dangling modifier. And then finally, her baseball bat was found looking in the closet. This one is a little harder. What's confusing in this sentence? Take a moment and circle or think about which one is the dangling modifier. Her baseball bat was found looking in the closet. Well, the dangling modifier in this sentence is looking in the closet because at this point, this sentence sounds like the baseball bat is the one that is looking, not actually her. So, unexplored for years. Does it make sense that the scientists were unexplored for years? No, this is the phrase that is the dangling modifier. Walking. Does it make sense that the morning would be walking? No. That's the dangling modifier. And at the end, does it make sense that the baseball bat was looking in the closet? No. So this must be a dangling modifier. Now, when you find a dangling modifier, we need to fix the sentence by rearranging or adding words to make the meaning logical and clear. So we have the dangling modifier of cleaning the attic, an old trunk was found. We can now, the modifier cleaning the attic is logically and clearly modifies the subject we. So we can say cleaning the attic, we found an old trunk. And then we can change the sentence one more time by saying, while we were cleaning the attic, an old trunk was found. Changing the dangling modifier into a clause makes the meaning more clear. The clause modifies was found, and it tells when the trunk was found. Now that you've gone over this lesson, you're going to put this into practice. You are going to complete the Tuesday Correcting Modifiers Practice Jamboard. Now, this is a pretty difficult concept, so I want you to try your best on the Jamboard, and we're going to go over the answers another day. This is something that is important in learning in 7th grade, but it's a difficult process that we're going to keep going over. So if you need to rewatch a part of this video, that is perfectly fine. Good luck with today's assignment, and I will see you later. Bye, everyone.